with homelessness on the rise. Unemployment rate in Canada in some provinces are as high as 9 and 10%, with others peaking over 10%. Unemployment in the US also rising. Inflation rising, the cost of living rising. Unfortunately, we're seeing stores close. The other day I was in a store looking, I just needed a drink. I was out shopping, I looked around. All they had was some dishware, some plates. They didn't even have a drink or a piece of food to eat. Shelves are emptying. And while this is a pretty extreme situation, the bottom line is people simply aren't ready for this joblessness that's about to hit us real hard. Welcome back to the hustle and welcome back to the grind, everybody. Let's break this down because things are changing at an alarming rate. Well, a lot of us hate our jobs and we look at our bosses like micromanagers and we're not really all that excited every single day. Seems to be a drag. Some people look at it as a little bit of a blessing. Like I've had managers say in the past, you should be lucky you have a job. Or they'll pull that drawer out and they'll say, I have 25 other resumes in here just waiting to give a call. You hate when people do that. And that's clearly one of the most tasteless maneuvers that any manager, old school manager, can possibly do. But things are changing. We're seeing the economy flipping and changing. This transition to AI means that a lot of jobs, fast food particularly, are merely a one quick knee-jerk decision away from eliminating vast waves of jobs. We think about large-scale jobs, oil and gas. We know that's a difficult industry, the ups and downs, and all really driven based on the current administration. Other industries, the automotive sector, a big impact right there these days. We hear whether you manufacture on US soil, whether you don't, that's having a huge impact on who's building them, who's employed, and who's not. And that seems to be changing on a regular basis. Every industry right now is currently impacted seriously. I mean, it doesn't matter where you are. You think you're a part of a big corporation and you're safe. You have your 401k, you have all your investments, you're ready to go, and you only have 10 years left. But guess what? That can all flip at the drop of a hat, and it does. I mean, I personally experienced that. I was in the midst of my career, well, realistically closer to the tail end, and I had a couple of years left by my watch. But there's a decision. The organization made a vast decision to chop 15 to 20% of the organization right off the top. Have you heard the latest news? Nissan not selling cars. So in the automotive sector, that is one of the hardest hit spaces right now. Nissan's closing as many as 17 plants and facilities. And on top of it, they're laying off another 10, I believe 11,000 workers as we speak today. They'd let go 10,000 the year before. And unfortunately, they're now at somewhere in that 15 to 20% of their labor force is gone literally overnight. Now, you can say we saw that coming and you can predict it all day long. And there's so many signs, the writing on the wall, that Nissan wasn't really set up for longevity, at least not in recent years with quality and what kind of other issues they've had. The writing was on the wall for some time. However, we know it, and yet we failed to do anything about it. And you know what? I knew all of that. I didn't know Nissan. I didn't know a lot of these things, but I did know that if there's one thing for sure, our job is not permanent. Nothing's permanent about any job that we have. Fast food. We talk about McDonald's. Have you heard the latest stats on McDonald's and Starbucks? A couple of major big global giants in terms of fast food. Who do they cater to? Usually the slightly less well-heeled. Middle class and the lower income levels are typically those that flood the doors of the McDonald's and the Starbucks. Well, prices have been going up recently. I mean, when I started even 5 or 6 years ago, I think back how much, a Big Mac meal at McDonald's was $5. That wasn't that long ago. Now I go in there and it's $15, $14. Of course, Canadian funds. And then they give you a special deal with a big coupon and make you feel like you're winning the lottery by saying, oh, special deal, $10 for a Big Mac meal. Absolute slap in the face. But what they're seeing at McDonald's and Starbucks these days is sales are in the toilet. It's actually getting so bad, in fact, that there's conversation about these companies making some major restructuring and possibly having even conversations about going out of business at some level. Because the worst part is the people that basically pay and consume and walk through the doors of the McDonald's are those that are typically middle class and lower income levels. Well, those are the people hit hardest right now with jobs, job loss every which way. I mean, a lot of the jobs are subbed out. A lot of these jobs no longer exist. And it seems like it doesn't matter which country you're from. There seems to be decisions right now. But one thing's for sure, it's not the little taxpayer. The taxpayer continues to pay the piper. And so, unfortunately, all the weight of taxation seems to fall on the vast majority of the middle and lower class income earners. So what does that ultimately mean? Less people with money, and ultimately that's a luxury item. Whether you need that boat, whether you need that quad or those other toys. A lot of people are just either getting their junk repossessed, and we see repossession rates on the rise. It's another clear indication. That's one of the leading indicators when some of the toys and cars and homes get repossessed and foreclosed on. Those are strong indicators that things are changing. The market is swinging. It's not at a place right now where people are doing well for themselves. People aren't typically thriving. And while a lot of the, day-to-day middle class just truck along their business and it doesn't impact you. If it doesn't impact you today, it seems to just sort of skate by, and most of us really don't pay a lot of attention to it on a day-to-day basis. It doesn't seem to hit us until it hits us. And that's what's going on in today's market. Industries are changing, shifting, priorities are shifting. The pursuit of the bottom line for a lot of these organizations to constantly improve quarter over quarter their profits means that there's always this effort. Money over matter, of course. People are always the first thing to go because people are resources that are very costly. And on top of that, if you work for any large corporation, as I did, you can pretty much appreciate that the priorities typically go to saving costs. Of course, either you do mass layoffs like we've seen in our organization over the years, whether it's cutting 10, 15, 20%, or whether there's other changes. Some of the changes might be a little smaller, demotions, maybe passively, aggressively pushing people out. People typically that are a little older, and we've spoken about ageism. Ageism is real. I mean, if you're later on in your working career, say, into your mid-40s, between mid-40s and beyond, that's when you start getting a target on your back. Because organizations will start to passively isolate you, passively, aggressively push you out the door. And they won't do it in an obvious way. Ultimately, they're just going to make you feel miserable as hell and make you want to leave. And so these are some of the maneuvers that are being done to replace you and put somebody that's maybe a 20, 22-year-old that can do your job for a lot less money, or just consolidate and have one of your peers pick up your slack for them. We talk about supply chain. Supply chain's a big one. Trade. It's all about trade right now. Whether it's, you talk about even Canada, US, and some of the trade conversations, with the metal and the aluminum, steel, aluminum, whether it's manufactured in one country or manufactured in the other, today, tomorrow, it seems every day it's just a little bit different. And it's one decision away from warehouses and factories shutting down and closing the door on thousands of workers. Here today, gone tomorrow. And it's as simple as that. Supply chain is what makes the world go around. And like I spoke, when I went to that grocery store and I saw little food, that's Armageddon. Let's not kind of be too overzealous on that conversation, but that is a possibility. We certainly saw that. And Florida really tasted a bunch of that during some of the floods and some of the storms last year when you couldn't get gas, you couldn't get food, the shelves were empty. That was pretty much on a minute scale, a mass exodus that people were experiencing. A shortage of food, a shortage of fueling. Of course, even the electric cars, they thought they were clever and they were going to plug in somewhere, and even the power and the lights went out. And as an electrician, you can appreciate nobody complains until the lights don't come on. Have you ever sat in your house and the power went out and you look around in your neighbor's house and you look at your neighbor's windows and there's lights out across the whole neighborhood? That's when people start to panic and get excited. But it's never a problem until it impacts them. But sadly, we're just on the hairy edge of one of those catastrophic failures. Supply chain, power, the talk about trades of power and water and resources, manufacturing, that is having a huge change right now. Whether you're getting involved with trade across the globe, the decisions between some of these global leaders, it's one bad decision, it's one conversation that goes off the rails away from shutting down a whole industry. Now, granted, they're all treading water, and there's clearly, a strong support to try to keep every country afloat. But it's one of those things that you just never know. And so while many of us in Canada, US have gone for years without thinking twice about our job, we lock in, we get our job, we put all this value in our job. But again, it's a quick decision, knee-jerk response by upper management, whether they want to make a change, whether they want to trim some so-called proverbial fat. And any industry right now is up for the take. See, this is the problem right now. People get too much success and too much value on the job that they have today. Okay, you get laid off, boo-hoo, you move on, right? Well, we talked about ageism will be an impact, guaranteed. I know people that have gone out there in their 50s, after getting a layoff, and they've searched, job hunted for months. A couple guys I know, one of them actually found a permanent gig after about 8 months of searching, and the other one had still on a temporary role. So nothing's guaranteed in this world. Okay, well, and then of course, you move on. Maybe you had a great job with this great corporation, and you move on and you say, okay, they finally give you your walk-in papers, you take your 401k, if your 401k has any value to it. Because now what we're seeing is not just your job is at risk, your investments for retirement, your investments for what you were hoping for the future are at a major risk. Now we know the long-term prognosis from most of the market is generally upwardly trending, S&P 500. I mean, just look at the numbers. Generally long-term, it's upward trending. But what if you're one of those that's in that space? What if you're close? What if it's a 5-year recovery? What if it takes 10 years to recover from a major down climb? What if it takes a significant amount of time to respond and come back? And what if you are one of those that's within a couple of years of retirement? Well, what do you think that does to the value of your investments and your portfolio? What do you think that does for your ability to possibly retire? It has a major impact, whether it's your investments, whether it's your job. Truly, we're in a very unstable place right now. And if there's one thing for sure, the globe is not ready for this. We're not ready for this. And so it's like I often say, live within your means. And this is the problem. Of course, typically we find Americans, Canadians always want to buy more. And it's that capitalism, it's that supply and demand, but more importantly, it's that need and the want to buy that next shiny toy that gets us rooked. And it's nice to have those toys. It's nice to have that new car, but it's always within your means. As long as you can pay for a car, have it in a garage, and not having these big payments is great, because the average transaction price today of a new vehicle is about $48,000. And that takes you to an average car loan right now at about $750 a month. Again, in the US, I've spoken about this before, and in Canada, most people are spending $1,200, $1,500 a month for a car loan. That's a lot of money, especially when you consider rent in a smaller city like Red Deer, maybe even Edmonton, is up around $1,500 for a single bedroom apartment. So you're almost at the cost of rent for your car payment. Now, granted, we all need a vehicle to get around these countries. A lot of them are quite spread out. You need a vehicle. But this is just an example of, you've got to live within your means. You can have that Ferrari, you can have that Porsche, as long as you've got the means and it's not tying you down, it's not holding you back, and it's not going to have a major impact on your longevity financially. See, ultimately, it's about living within the means, and this is what's going on. People get too comfortable. They lock in with these 25-year mortgages. Even worse, they get in with these 8-year car loans at $1,000 a month. Next thing you know, something happens, boom, they're out of a job. Now what? Now they're scrambling, now they're panicking. So really, where I'm at is, looking at your investments, looking at your job, the security. Well, really, there is no security. Your job is a day-to-day. Now, it's not about gigs. It is about, doing the best that you can to build your future. And you've got to do that. You've got to build your 401k. You've got to build up your investments, whether it's RRSPs, TFSAs. You've got to put money in for the future. You have to assume the best. The best case scenario is what you put in, you get out, and then some. Ultimately, that's all we can do. But if there's one thing that I've learned along this world is, after changing jobs numerous times in my career, as they say, the average person changes their careers 5-6 times. You know what? There's nothing guaranteed and there's nothing permanent. Your career, your job is not permanent. And that's one thing that I have certainly learned in this long life of 55 years, that you've just got to do the best with what you've got. Save a little money for a rainy day, because that rainy day might in fact be coming. And actually, speaking of that, look at all the beautiful little dandelions everywhere. It's a little ocean of dandelions, and look at the clouds. It's actually supposed to roll in. Speaking of rainy days, they're talking about a major rainstorm and wind and whatnot here later today. So could be an interesting one, but it's kind of interesting, the analogy, of course. But people are generally not ready. People are not ready for the impact of what this economy, the instability, the volatility, the decision making that could impact your job, your corporate space. You think you might have 20 years left in that company? I mean, if you do, that's super, but that's not something I would hang my hat on, because that's generally not where we're at today. You know, you look at a lot of our parents, maybe the boomers and beyond, the silent group, they did have careers that spanned an entire lifetime. They could get into their job, their factory job, their corporate job. They could pound the pavement. They could just work it for, 35, 40 years, get your retirement papers, get your fancy watch, they'll walk you out the door with the barbecue, shaking hands, everybody's happy. That just doesn't happen really too much anymore. Even the organization I worked for, they used to do sort of these celebration type parties. Celebrate, this person's a 15-year, this one's a 20-year, this is a 25-year. And they would have these parties. Every 5 years, you'd get this big gift, a night on the town, maybe a trip, a little localized trip, a paid vacation, and a party and some booze, get you liquored up so you say things inadvertently that you probably shouldn't have on work hours. I mean, inside voice. But realistically, they used to celebrate those parties. They used to celebrate those milestones. They don't give a shit anymore. There's no milestones. They want you in and out as fast as possible. Use you up, abuse you up, and move you along. And so that's just more of the industry we're in today. Times have changed. Honestly, in 5-7 years, it has done a literal 180. And where there was a time where if you did work hard and you didn't put in the effort and you did all those right things and you did try to move up and take the odd promotion and just, head down, ass up, you could literally do your best and you could hang on there for a whole career. That just isn't happening. Of course, changes in corporations, changes in CEOs, changes in supply chain, changes in leadership at government levels. There's so many moving parts and so many decisions being made almost pretty much on the daily that has your life and your own lifestyle, including that of your family, all hanging in the wings just because that decision could impact whether you're gainfully employed tomorrow or not. Anyway, ultimately, this really isn't about panic mode. It is a serious awareness and hopefully an eye-opening to those who are still working in the game, still working in the corporate world, still eating out every day at McDonald's. Think twice. Luxury items, think twice certainly about your job. Lock down, put the money away. Reinvest. Don't overspend. Buy your new car. As you get into retirement, you probably want a new vehicle anyway, because who wants to be wrenching on a 30-year-old vehicle when you're 68 years old? Nobody. So it's okay to buy a new car, absolutely. But always just sort of live within your means so that you're not hanging out to dry. Just think about the what ifs. This is a scenario I used to work with, as being in the electrical industry and the high voltage industry. Like you see the big towers right there. I used to work around equipment like that all the time. And really, you always have to ask yourself the question, what if? So the same thing goes with when you're talking about your finances, the economy, the environment that you're in your workspace. Just think about the what if. What if I lost my job this week? What would it take? How much buffer would I have? Do you have the money to coexist? How long can you survive? If you lost your job, sure, there's UI and there's those other things, and you can assume you can go out there and get a new job tomorrow. Maybe your brother-in-law knows somebody and he can get you in that little job. But let's be honest. Until you really start making those calls, you don't know. Because 50%, 60, 70% of the time, I've had people say things like that. Yeah, we can hook you up. I know Johnny over there. And next thing you know, you actually make the call and that never materializes. So never hang your hat on that. Always think about the what if. If you're going to get those papers tomorrow, are you in a position to actually sustain your livelihood? Do you have enough buffer? Do you have enough income? Do you have enough money in the account to tie you through your mortgage? Maybe you have a car payment, your bills. Do you have enough money to carry you through those tough times? Think about 6 months to a year, ideally, minimum is what you should have liquid available if you should have to get into that predicament. And a lot of people are. I know numerous people that have found themselves having to pitch their toys, sell their vehicles, downsize their house, all because of some one little change, their job. It changed. The rug got pulled out from underneath them. Anyway, I just want to share that with you all. Things are very interesting right now on the work front. And that's why, you know what? I loved my job at the time until it got way too
oh, I don't know what the right word is, but until it started changing and they started pulling you outside of the things that you like doing, which was why you went in that line of work in the first place. Then they had to start taking you into these weird, office politics, and nobody wants to be part of that. You just want to show up, do your job, get paid, move on. But I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. If you're worried about the future, maybe your investments and possibly your job. I know a lot of people are. I personally know numerous people that are in that predicament. And let me tell you, I am so happy that when I got timed out of there, it was literally just in the nick of time. I can't think of what, the next 10 years is going to look like. It's going to be an interesting time, everybody. Buckle in, hold on tight. Anyway, please do drop a line and don't forget to subscribe. We'll talk to y'all real soon. Bye-bye.